This is Johnny Dosco. Stay tuned for another Score Sheet podcast. Holy Kadelka!
Hello and welcome to another Score Sheet podcast. Today I'm happy to say we have as a first-time guest with us Corey Brock, who is the beat writer for the San Diego Padres for MLB.com. How are you today, Corey?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Well, you joined Score Sheet for the first time this year, and we found out you were a beat writer. We thought, wow, we should get this guy on and have him talk about the Padres and maybe your experience with Score Sheet and chat for a few minutes.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's fire away.
All right. Well, you know, I read quite a bit when the Padres re-signed Quentin and Street to those contract extensions. There was kind of some negative comments on the web and a few positive. As a beat writer, what did you think of those contracts?
You know, I think time will tell. I mean, these are, by no means are these what you would call club-friendly deals necessarily, although I don't think they went overboard. I think maybe the Street deal is a little club-friendlier than the Quentin deal. And Street has been, you know, he's been lights out. He's kind of followed in line of a lot of guys we've had here, Trevor Hoffman, Keith Bell up until last year, and he's been very good, and, you know, certainly pitching in this ballpark helps. The Quentin one is a tough one because, you know, this is a guy that, you know, has an injury history. He had knee surgery in spring training, didn't play until the, you know, end of May, came out with a big splash with a bunch of home runs at Wrigley Field. Kind of gives you a little bit of a legitimate middle-of-the-order bat, something they haven't had since Adrian Gonzalez left. The key is how long are you going to be able to keep him on the field. If you get 125 games out of him a year, is that fine? If those 125 games are really good, then I think it's a good deal. So I think the interesting part here, and I think what has San Diego fans excited maybe for the first time in a few years, is, you know, July 31st came and went without them selling off pieces. There was no Jake Peavy trade. There was no Mike Adams trade. You were actually securing guys moving forward into the future. So that's a little different, but I think for a fan base that's maybe been a little disenchanted by this team moving players, making deals, always kind of, you know, quote, building for the future, that they're going to kind of circle the wagons here and work from this group.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. At least they're making their fans a little happier. And then, of course, as a fantasy player, it doesn't matter to us so much whether these guys are on teams that have winning records or losing records. I think as a Quentin owner, which I happen to be, it's a little depressing to think of him being stuck now in Petco Park for 3 years or more. I was kind of hoping that they'd trade him, you know, somewhere like, I don't know, Houston or somewhere where the park is more hitter friendly.
Yeah, and I think you're going to find that with a lot of Padres. Chase Headley is another guy who, you look at his road splits, you know, during his time in the big leagues, and they're dramatically better than they are at Petco. You know, he's a switch hitter with some power, but, you know, especially from the left-hand side, really victimized by this ballpark, by that area in right center here that they affectionately call Death Valley. But, you know, for Quentin, I think he's a little different in the sense that I think true right-handed power does play at Petco Park. And I look at an example from this past week against the Cubs. I forget who was pitching, but someone threw him a breaking ball, and he's out on his front foot, but he's still strong enough that he was able to hit a home run the left center field. And I think that, you know, this guy's, you know, his days of maybe hitting 30 home runs have come and gone, but I still think that he could be a productive player at Petco Park. And the important thing is, and I think we've seen this now with Ryan Ludwig, who's having a big year for the Reds, and admitted after his time in San Diego had passed that he let the ballpark get in his head. I don't really get the sense that Carlos Quentin has let that happen. I think he's a little mentally stronger than that and is going to be able to put up with this ballpark. Of course, knowing that you're going to play just as many games on the road as you do at home.
Yeah, that helps. Well, I think the same thing happened to pitchers for many years at Coors Field. I think there were pitchers that Colorado acquired, and they just came into the situation depressed about pitching in Colorado from their first day there, and they never really recovered. And yeah, maybe the hitters have the same thing in Petco. Well, because I know when Matt Latos got traded, I stayed away from him because I just thought, well, I want to see how he pitches when he's not got Petco as a home field.
And that's fair. You know, I think a young guy that's had some success in the big leagues. Has pitched well on the road relatively, but I think it's fair to be a little cautious because you're not just going from one ballpark to another. You're going from one extreme ballpark to the other extreme. Very pitcher-friendly Yellowstone Park environment here, and especially where the ball doesn't really travel after 8 o'clock because of the marine layer, where in Cincinnati, and we were just there, that you elevate a ball a little bit, and it could be a real adventure. I remember we went there in 2007 or 2008, and Brian Giles hit 5 home runs in one weekend. I'm not sure he hit 5 more the rest of the year, and in fact, I'm sure he didn't. Just kind of kept, flicking his wrist and hitting the ball in the visiting bullpen down the right field line. And you got to be careful at that place, otherwise your balls will end up in the Ohio River.
Yeah, no, I tell that to people when I talk to them in the preseason that if guys are traded, it doesn't matter so much for us whether they're traded from winning to losing teams or vice versa, especially in score sheet where a player's runs scored or RBIs in real life don't really matter. It's not like rotisserie where if you get traded to a really good hitting lineup and you're a hitter, your value goes up just because of the RBI and run scored opportunities. In score sheet, it's just what your on-base percentage and slugging percentage are going to be as a hitter that really matter. So I don't think the winning-losing matters much in real life, but the park effects, I think those get overlooked. And these parks are building these days that are so different. There's as you said, Yellowstone Park down there in San Diego is a far different place than playing in Cincinnati.
Yeah, and what's funny is I have a younger brother who plays a lot of fantasy baseball, and Clayton Richard, you guys probably noticed he threw a shutout a couple days ago here against the Cubs, and my brother calls me after the fact. He goes, "Well, I meant to put Clayton Richard in my lineup," and I was like, "You should always put Clayton Richard in your lineup when he's pitching at home. You should always put pitcher X, no matter who he is, in your lineup when he's pitching at Petco Park, and you take your chances with that." And he's like, "Yeah, I know. If I would have called you, that's what you would have told me." But yeah, it could be a real advantage. I don't know if it necessarily sets up for giving a false positive as to how good a pitcher is. It really depends on the guy. Clayton Richard's a guy who, by and large, he's a ground ball pitcher. I mean, he leads the league in ground balls. I mean, this isn't a guy that's giving up 15 fly balls a game, several of which, like if he were in Cincinnati, would end up over the fence. So it still depends on the guy, but everything else being equal, go with the guy at Petco.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's kind of the opposite of that old bench all your Colorado pitchers when they're at home. Well, moving away from the Padres just a little bit, maybe 100 miles, what do you think of Hanley Ramirez and the Dodgers?
What a great acquisition for them. A team that is certainly got off to a great start. They sustained some injury issues with Kemp and Ethier. I mean, we saw them a lot in the first couple weeks of the season, and Kemp just, completely torched the Padres. And then he missed some time, and Ethier's been very good. But I really like the composition of their roster. I still think they're a little light offensively. Now Hanley, has he played 14 games, and he's driven in a few runs. But I think by and large he's going to be a nice spark for them, and certainly a bigger upgrade than what they had going. A guy I really like on their team that the Padres had in 2010. Here is Jerry Hairston Jr., who may be a better player in his 30s than he was in his 20s. A guy that can kind of move around and use him in a lot of different ways and spell guys on occasion. They're getting some real breakout performances this year. A.J. Ellis, Mark Ellis. But, I think the Ramirez trade was a big one for them. And, I think it kind of made the rest of the division kind of sit back and go, whoa, they're going for it. And subsequently the Giants made the move with Hunter Pence. But I wouldn't discount the Diamondbacks either. They're kind of lurking in the bushes there. So I think it's going to be fun to watch this race over these next couple months. The NL West is always fun to watch. I mean, it's a different team every year at the top, and there's a lot of room for upward mobility. For as much as the Padres have struggled this year. Now they're playing a little better now, but they're going into a tough part of their schedule. I think that, you got Street and Quinton, and you get some of the injured players they had. Unbelievable injury history this year. You get some of those guys back, and who's to say you can't make a run? That's one of the things about the Wild Wild West that I enjoy most.
Yeah, it's usually a pretty wide open division with 2 or 3 teams fighting for first, and as you said, it's 2 or 3 different teams. every year. You know, Colorado's only a couple years removed from where they were considered the class of the division, and now they're down there below the Padres.
Yeah, and I think their future looks a little bit more grim than the Padres, just the way that roster's set up and some of the the internal issues and the Dan O'Dowd situation. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And for me, I think the interesting thing, you kind of see what the Dodgers are now, you see what the Giants are now. I think people are sort of waiting for the Diamondbacks to kind of kick it into a different gear, kind of one they had last year. So it'll be it's going to be a sprint to the finish here, but it's going to be a lot of fun watching these teams. And I think that one of the beauties is all these teams are going to play each other a bunch over the next 2 months. So hey, if you don't make it happen, it's your fault. I mean, you have some head-to-head matchups with these teams. You better make some ground.
Yeah, no, it'll be fun seeing them all play each other. Well, do you have any thoughts on score sheet here in your first year?
Yeah, it's been fun. It's kind of a learning process, and the funny thing is a lot of beat writers. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. There's a lot that I know of play score sheet and really enjoy it, and that's what first sort of got me hooked on it. So it's still kind of something that I'm discovering about and reading about and looking how other people handle their teams. So, but it's great. I would highly encourage it for anybody who likes fantasy baseball but maybe wants to take it up to that next level, and you kind of get that amateur GM hat on, and you could do some fun things with it. So I think it's a wonderful, wonderful tool for fans.
Well, I'm glad you're liking it. Yeah, we do have a pretty fair number of folks that either are in the fantasy baseball industry, right, content providers or something, or even, as you said, work for MLB, that seem to like to play score sheet. I think maybe because it's a little more like managing a real team. I think the things that matter for a real baseball team, such as on-base percentage and slugging percentage, the fact that those matter more in score sheet rather than trying to keep track of a steals category might be why more of the MLB people would play it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's, and I see a lot of people that I follow that work in the game or outside the game on Twitter lamenting the kind of week they've had and celebrating the good weeks they've had. They seem like they lament their bad weeks a lot more than they celebrate their good ones, but I guess maybe that's how the industry goes.
I think that's how human nature is. I know after doing this 27 years now that somebody they can go 5-1 3 weeks in a row, but without ever commenting. Then they have 1, 2, and 4 week and lose one game kind of in the 10th inning, and that's the one game they talk about.
Right. Why are we such a glass half full society? Why can't we just enjoy the good things?
Yeah. No, I get people that are in first place by 6 games and they want to know how they somehow lost a game in the last inning. I'm like, well, I don't know. You won 3 one-run games earlier in the week. Let's focus on those. You'll be happier.
Yeah, exactly. We'll all live a lot longer.
Yeah. Well, I've done this long enough now. I kind of try to look at the happy aspect. Well, it's been great talking to you, and I hope you keep playing score sheet for a long time.
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying it, and I appreciate you having me on today. This has been fun.
Well, thanks for doing it, and hopefully you can have the Padres beat the Dodgers, because I'm a big Giants fan, so anytime the Dodgers lose, I'm a happy guy.
I will put in a good word in the clubhouse. How's that?
Well, thank you. I'd appreciate that. All right, have a good time.
Yeah, I'll get some strange looks, but yeah, no, you bet. Thanks for having me.
All right, Corey.